You are listening to When Life Gives You Lemons, the podcast that speaks to high-performing individuals who have been through adversity but come back stronger. I'm your host, Emma Levy, a physiotherapist who has helped elite athletes on their way to Olympic success. This podcast was born following my own trauma when I was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 36. Sat in the chemo chair, I set myself the goal of starting a podcast to explore resilience and the importance of mindset. During this Olympic special mini-series, I will be speaking to some of the Team GB athletes and support staff who travelled to Paris for the Olympic and Paralympic Games. We aim to delve into how it truly feels to represent your country, the training, the build-up, the pressures associated with that, and how these guys prepare for the biggest stage in the world. Today, I'm welcoming Freya Anderson to the podcast. Freya is a British swimmer, having won medals at the World, European, Commonwealth, and Olympic Games. Freya didn't have the ideal lead up to the Paris Games due to illness, but managed to overcome glandular fever and make her return just in time for the Olympics, where she was part of the 4x100 and 200 metre freestyle and 4x100 metre medley relays. Sadly, they didn't medal this time, but Freya can already call herself an Olympic medalist from Tokyo 2021, where she was part of the 4x100 metre medley team who won gold. Freya, thank you for talking to us today. I hope I got all that right with the 100, 200 metre medley, freestyle, etc.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it does get a bit confusing. There's quite a lot of events going on, but no, perfect. Aced it.
Amazing. So tell us, have you enjoyed your long break from swimming?
I have, yeah. I feel like I've been non-stop. So, like, obviously we had the Olympics come to a close and then we had sort of a week break in Paris, which was nice just to get us all together and just like relax together. It was really nice. And then where have I been? So I live down in Bath and I've come up to my family's home up near Liverpool.
Nice.
And then I've been across to Dublin with my brother. I've been to Croatia with the girls. And then I've been to Amsterdam with my mum. We just got back. So yeah, I feel like it's actually not been much of a break. It's been like I've just been squeezing in break after break of holidays. But no, I've definitely really enjoyed it and I'm ready to get back training.
Yeah, and you return on Monday, you said?
Yeah, Monday. So it's the last weekend. But I'm really excited just to get back amongst the squad again and
nice.
See my coach and everything. So yeah.
Good. What does your normal training schedule look like?
Weekly, it's Monday to Saturday, and it's usually about 8 to 10 sessions in the pool, and 3 gym sessions. I have 2 Pilates sessions, and then before each of the swim sessions, there's usually about half an hour of like prep and priming. So like you doing all them boring like rehab exercises, but they have to be done. I'm sure you'll know all about that, but
I was going to say, don't call them boring. It's the best part.
They're really boring to me because I've been doing them since like 2016, so it does get a bit tedious, but they've got to be done.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that's weekly, so the hours do add up, and then daily it's kind of like, you have your pre-pool, 2-hour swim, an hour in the gym, go home, eat, come back, and half an hour of like abs or shoulders, 2-hour swim, head home, eat, bed, do it all again.
And the reputation of swimming is that it's really early mornings, because I think that starts when you're a school kid and you've got to get up and do it before school. Does that continue when you finish school? Do you still train really early every day?
No, definitely not. I remember back when I was in like primary school, I think I was getting up at like 5:15 to get in the pool at 6, 5:45 or something, just so we could get out and then come back for school. But no, we kind of have it's kind of a bit luxurious these days now. I think we don't dive in till 8 o'clock, so it's like
luxury.
7:30 on deck, waking up at like 6:40 or something, and yeah, bit of a lie-in compared to the old days.
Yeah. So how old were you when you got into swimming?
Oh gosh, my mum and dad obviously got me into it just as a life skill. Probably when I was like 4 or 5. I always say 4, 5 or 6. I don't actually know. It just sort of, it all blurs into one. And I didn't like it at first, but then once you start getting more confident in the water, you start enjoying yourself. And then I progressed up to the local club. That's probably when I was about 8 or 9. And then like the next bigger club on the Wirral, which was called Wirral Metro, that was probably when I was like 9 or 10. And then that's when I'd say it was probably becoming proper, like doing the mornings and going to school and doing the gym and stuff. So yeah, we're coming on to like nearly 15 years, I would say.
Yeah.
Properly.
And I read that you were quite a shy, anxious kid. I don't know if that's true, but if that is true, do you think swimming helped you in life skills?
Yeah, big time. I mean, I think I've said this in another interview when I was getting bumped up into. So like my first club was called Hoylake, and they had like this group system of like colours. So like gold, silver, bronze at the top, and then like red, blue, whatever. And they put me like in the blue group or something instead of the yellow group, which was at the bottom. And I was just like so embarrassed. I didn't want to go ahead of where I thought I should have been. And I remember they took me on poolside, and I was just like hiding behind my mum's legs, like just crying. Um, God knows why. I think I was on it. Was probably just the shyness and stuff, and I didn't think I should be amongst all them older kids. But yeah, once I sort of settled in and like started making friends and stuff through swimming, it really helped. And then I think one of the main things that's helped my confidence was when I went to Ellesmere College, like boarding school, and obviously I had to live away from my family in the week and train and like really. It's like I was only 14 then, so it's kind of a hard thing to ask of like a teenager.
Is that like a kind of swimming or sports specific school? Did you go there for swimming?
Yeah, I went there for swimming. They had a really good program and a great coach. And I think at the time, like they were really focused on rugby, even though they had like, I'm not gonna like badmouth it, but they did. It wasn't the best rugby program. But no, I went there for swimming, and it's just completely like it changed my life. To be honest, like it just made me so much more confident. I don't know what it was about it, like whether it was me having to be by myself, away from my family or something, or yeah, I don't know. But it's just honestly that's like changed my swimming career and myself as a person, I'd say.
And despite all those early mornings, and it's really hard to, as a kid, when you're at school and you're training twice a day as well. As a kid, did you enjoy the swimming?
Yeah, I think I did. It's hard to remember, like, but I think I did. I anything that was going on at school or at home, the minute you dive in the water, like it's just like a little bubble, and you can just forget about everything and just focus on swimming for that, I don't know, hour and a half. And I think that's what sort of made me fall in love with swimming, was just that, like, it's kind of a sanctuary, I guess, at the time. But yeah, no, I think I definitely enjoyed it. I really can't remember hating it when I was like, 9 or 10. And I remember I used to love racing. So that was always a lot of fun.
And do you still enjoy it now?
Yes, I feel like it's a very loaded question, but I would say I do. Obviously it's such a love-hate relationship with swimming, and I guess sport in general, when it's your, not your life, but your profession. And obviously everyone has bad days, good days, bad years, good years. It's really, really hard. Like, it is really hard. But I wouldn't want to do anything else. So I think that kind of answers the question. Like, I do love it. And especially this year, after all that mess at the start of the year with like glandular fever and stuff, and actually getting to the Olympics, and standing on the blocks and waiting for that swimmer to come in, and I'd really found my love for it then, I guess. And I was just, yeah, I was definitely in a better place than I was starting the year. So
Yeah.
I think for me, my love comes and goes, but at the moment we're loving it.
Yeah. And I think some people think it's really strange when I ask athletes that question, do they enjoy their sport? But I just know I've worked with athletes that are so ingrained in it that they've kind of got to the point where they don't even like it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's
Yeah.
really sad sometimes.
Yeah, because I think you can sort of just go on autopilot mode, and like that was kind of me a few years ago. I was literally just, I didn't know why I was doing it. I didn't know, why I was swimming, and you do just get sort of swept up in it, and because it's your life. So yeah, I can understand where they come from like that.
Yeah. Let's talk about Paris. So Paris was your second Olympic Games. How was it for you?
It was good. Yeah. Again, like, I'm trying not to think of the past and this whole year, but you have to put things into perspective. So I wasn't beating myself up about my performances as much as I thought I would, because I was, I guess, yeah, putting it into perspective. And I'd had like 12 weeks of proper training, and I still went. I think it was like my third fastest split in in the 200 or something. And
Whatever,
so,
third fastest split ever. Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah, I think so. So if you like step back and look at it that way, it wasn't a disaster. And I mean, I had like the most fun going out in front of that crowd, and my family were able to be there, and like just being with the girls and the guys on the team. Like, I loved the experience of it. So I think that kind of made up for, I'm not going to say like the lack of performance, because I still perform quite well, but I know I always want better of myself, but
Yeah.
I've had to sort of shift it into being a bit kinder to myself and looking at it in the perspective of this whole year. So all in all, I really, really did enjoy it, like the whole experience as well, of the village, the crowd, everything. But yeah, it was one of them funny ones. But I think I can walk away from it and be proud, I'd say.
Yeah. And Tokyo, you medalled. You were part of the winning gold medal team. And again, I read somewhere that you described yourself as a reluctant gold medalist because you hadn't
Yeah.
actually raced in that final. Do you still feel that way?
I think I'll always feel that way, but the conversations I've had with people, it's like, say a football team, I don't know, won the FA Cup or something. I don't know if that's a big, big trophy, but like the players that came off in the first half, they're not going to be any less of a champion than the ones that came on in the second. So
Exactly.
I don't know, and I would never ever think that of anyone else who was in that situation. They helped that team get there and ultimately put in that final performance. But I guess it is still a bit funny to me, I
Really?
think. Yeah.
Okay.
It sounds a bit silly, but it's just how my brain works.
Yeah. And Tokyo was the COVID games, obviously. So Paris was quite different because you had your family, you had your friends there. Um, did they differ a lot for you? And do you kind of you've been to 2 Olympic Games now. Which one did you prefer?
I think I can like say I've definitely preferred Paris more.
Okay.
Tokyo, again, I was coming off some sort of setback. I think it was my shoulder or my back injury. And the meet itself was like such a roller coaster of maybe underperforming and then having to bounce back and then doing it again and again. And then obviously having no crowd, it was different because I really love racing in front of a crowd. But it wasn't a negative experience, I would say. And just being with the team, I think, on both occasions. My favourite part of Tokyo was, I think it was actually after my 200 freestyle semi, so I'd kind of bombed out the final, like whatever. So I was a bit down, and Tom Dean was coming on next, his final. So I was like waiting on poolside, and I had everyone like trying to usher me off into media, like go this way. I'm like, no, let me watch. So I got to watch Dino, win the Olympics, which was amazing. I got to give him a hug afterwards. I think like that, like moments like that, kind of stand out for me in Tokyo.
What moments stand out for you in Paris?
I don't know if there's any specific moment, but it was just like the team. I don't know, just the vibes of the team, and like we've just become such a close knit team, especially us relay girls. Like, we're diving in for each other, and I think we were a bit disappointed with fifth in the 4x2. So we just all have each other's backs, and it was a bit emotional, like, but I think we were all really proud of each other and our different journeys to get there. I think for me, like the Paris that's what stands out. Is just like that close knitness of just the team throughout the whole thing. Yeah.
This episode is sponsored by Recovery from Joint Operations. They are a premier supplier of bracing and cold compression solutions and the only bracing provider able to supply the highest quality knitted supports, complemented by a full range of framed braces. They offer a solution at every step, from elite sport to surgical recovery, and all of the products come with full clinical support and advice. As a physiotherapist, I've seen these in action at the Olympic Games in Paris and can personally highly recommend these products. Get in touch for more information. The website is in the show notes. Like you've said, it wasn't the smoothest journey in, was it? Because I think 2023, you basically smashed it and you won loads of medals at the European Games. I think you won 5 medals at the Europeans. And then you were looking like, in your prime, ready for Paris, ready for the Olympics. And then around Christmas time, you got ill, which was finally diagnosed with glandular fever, which is fairly significant. So what actually happened there? Like, what were your symptoms and how long did you have to take off?
Yeah, so like you say, it was like that European short course was like I was back to like how I used to swim and stuff, and I was like, oh, this might be a good year. And then it gets to like Christmas, and I just had a lot of things happen, and I was under a lot of stress, and it just made me ill. So I was sort of ill over Christmas, got back better. New Year's had gone, got quite ill after New Year's, like bedbound for like 3 days, maybe, like just like upper infection kind of thing. And then started to build back up to training. We were racing in Belgium on like end of January. So I'd got well enough for that. And then I get there and like I just my gland like starts swelling up and like things are just hurting. And I do the heats of the 200 freestyle on the first day and like I just cruised it, whatever. But then once I gone back and then come back to the pool, I just felt like death. Like it was just awful. Like, my coach said like he could see in my eyes like something was wrong, and I was like, I don't think I can swim. Which I obviously thought like, oh, it was nothing. It was just a little, I'd be like down in the dumps for like a couple of days. But so I went back to bed, had a sleep, woke up the next morning, felt fine, just a bit like sore. Went into Antwerp for like brunch by myself and just had a mooch around. Came back, and then it was the last day of racing the next day, and then the day after we were to fly home. And I remember that day in the hotel and then flying home, oh, it was just awful. Like I couldn't speak, like my throat had just like gone massive. Yeah, it was horrible. I couldn't swallow all of this, and got home. Just I think I went straight to the doctors actually at the Bath UK Institute of Sport. Got bloods done. Went back home. I was in bed for a week. Like couldn't swallow, couldn't eat, couldn't chew anything. Like couldn't open my mouth. It was horrible. And I remember like I had like night sweats and stuff, and like I wouldn't sleep the whole night. It was awful. And then get better enough, like start going on like 10-minute walks and stuff. Like that was the level of knackeredness that I was dealing with. And then I think I was allowed actually to come in and do gym probably about a week and a half later. And I'm in gym, and then Kelly, our physio, comes and goes, Kate needs to have a word with you on the phone. I was like, oh God. So I go back, it's like, yeah, the bloods have, you've got glandular fever, the Epstein-Barr virus is in your blood, whatever. So I'm going to need you to stop training immediately, like go home.
Oh, no.
And then we also had a camp in Australia, like in probably about a week we were due to leave. She's like, yeah, you can't go on this camp, I need you home. I need to monitor you. So obviously that was a bit of a blow. But what can you do? So I just had to sort of take it in my stride and focus on recovery. And like it was just random things like getting your spleen ultrasounded to see if it was enlarged. Just all random sort of things that you didn't expect with an illness. But I guess glandular fever affects you differently.
Yeah, it's quite significant.
Yeah.
So how long did you take off in the end? How long until you started to gradually return to training?
I can't remember, even though it was like a few months ago, but probably a couple more, no, probably about a week after that, like getting my scans and stuff, and like I think my spleen was enlarged, and so then I had to wait for that to sort of settle. And I think at the time I actually got a throat infection on top of it, so I was on antibiotics. And then obviously once they'd stopped, I think I could come in and swim 500 metres and then get out. And I think at that point I was like begging my doctor just to let me go in for 10 minutes, like please let me just have a paddle. So that was probably about two or 3 weeks after I got my bloods done, I would say. And yeah, it was definitely a very slow, gradual return. Probably about this time, it's probably like mid-February, like so everyone's out in Australia, like living it up. And yeah, I was doing like half an hour swims, and it would gradually build up, but they were already low level, and like there was hardly any gym stuff because you can't agitate your spleen. So yeah, it was a bit of a trudge through them few months. But yeah,
And
what can you do?
yeah, and I imagine that was quite difficult though, watching your teammates and your competitors basically training really hard, and you having to just watch them, and probably were worried they were kind of improving, and you were not given the opportunity to.
Yeah, big time. But I mean, I've faced that quite a lot throughout my career, like with my back injuries and shoulder injuries. But I think this time it was like normally you try and push through. I know that's really bad to say, but most athletes would say the same thing. They try and push through the pain. But with glandular fever, you actually can't, because you might threaten your health in a year's time. So this time I really had to take a step back and just actually put my body first and my mind first instead of the athlete, which was really, really hard. But I had such a good team around me, like reassuring me that there was a plan. We could do this. We could get you to the games and get you on them blocks. And I couldn't have done it without them. Like, there's such a massive, I guess there's a massive team behind the scenes. And I definitely couldn't have done it without them. So yeah, it was hard knowing people were making these advantages and stuff, but it's something I've dealt with my whole career. And I guess I kind of like, I know this sounds kind of sadistic actually, but I kind of like having that setback so you can try and bounce back and kind of prove it to yourself and prove it to people around you.
Yeah. Well, that's what this podcast is actually about. It's called When Life Gives You Lemons. It's about how actually sometimes when you have those moments of adversity, it does push you to want to come back stronger and better.
Yeah, definitely. It's almost like not a refresh, but I guess it is kind of a bit of a refresh in your mind of, like, you find yourself missing the pain of training and missing doing them hard sets. So when you actually are well enough to do them, you don't take it for granted, I guess. Yeah. So it kind of helps in one sick way.
Yeah. What they say, being able to suffer is a privilege.
Yeah, for sure.
And as a physio as well, whenever I have athletes that get injured, one of my taglines is, you're going to come back better and stronger. Having that time off to reflect, to look at where actually you do need to improve can be such a positive moment, just like you said, to reset. Where do I need to work? Where do I need to get stronger? Where do I need to get better? And then you come back, and they always come back better. So then you got to April, and that was the British champs, wasn't it? It was Olympic selection, and you managed to qualify, which, that must have felt amazing, no?
Yeah, well, I think it was like about 2 weeks before trials I got ill again, but like probably like a throat infection or a viral infection. I just couldn't catch a break. But obviously going into the trials, like all the aquatics GB staff, like guys at the top, they weren't pushing me to even race. They said they put these clauses in the selection processes for these kind of reasons, like illnesses or injuries or certain situations. And obviously, me being me, I was like itching to race because I just love racing. And it was hard on that first day watching the 200 free girls. I was just like, oh, I just wish I could be there. But it was amazing to see, all four of them get that time. And it was nice to be sort of cheering on the sidelines for them. I guess it was kind of weird. I had FOMO, basically. And then the 100, I think, wasn't until like the last day or something. So, I kind of just ticked along. I was training there because my coaches were there and physios and stuff. So we just decided I'd go anyway. Training along, and then it got to the 100, and it was like the day before, and everyone's like, "Are you going to race?" I was like, "Yeah, why not? Like, just give it a hit out." And I remember being so nervous for like the pain of it, because I'd never done anything more than like a couple of sprints. So it was the heats, and I kind of, not like I didn't go all out, but like, I put some effort in, and it was quite painful. But it was just nice to be racing again, and even like all the silly stuff that most people hate, like getting your suit on and getting behind the blocks and like getting your cap on and doing your land priming. Like, it was just so much fun to be doing that. Because I guess that you do take it for granted, because you are kind of autopiloted when you're doing it. And then I did the final and came third, which I didn't think I could do. But I guess it was a nice little surprise to end the week, and that's ultimately what got me on the team, I think, is through that.
Wow.
That third place was like the relay selection and stuff, so it worked out all right.
Yeah. So when you were standing on those blocks in Paris, were you reflecting on the journey you'd had into it?
Not so much, I was more focused on the moment that I was in, and I think I might have got, because everyone was telling me, the past is in the past, like, you've had a great 3 months of training, like, just try and focus on that. And I think I only started to put it into perspective once the games were over, is like what I'd actually been through. Like, I was like bedbound for like a week, like, and then a few months later you're racing at the Olympic Games in a final. So I kind of had to make myself think like that almost. But when I was standing behind the blocks, it was just it was more like, do what you can, enjoy the moment, and just see what's in the tank. But I think it was definitely afterwards is when I started to actually think about where I'd started the year and where I'd finished it. Yeah.
I think as an outsider, kind of hearing about your journey into it, I think, you've done like phenomenally to get to a final in Olympic Games,
Yeah.
having been so poorly in the months leading up to it. It's just amazing.
Oh, thank you.
The other reason why I reached out to you to come on the podcast today is because I've seen you speak out about your mental health, specifically about OCD,
Mm-hmm.
obsessive compulsive disorder. Are you happy to talk about that?
Yeah.
Cool. So can you just start off by telling us what OCD is?
OCD, I think it can manifest in a lot of ways, but for me, it's this obsession. So, like an intrusive thought. Like most people get intrusive thoughts, throughout the day. Like, oh, what if I just crash my car right now, or what if the house caught on fire? But the difference between that and OCD is the compulsion that comes afterwards. So for me, like the compulsion is sort of something that will reassure yourself into thinking like, oh, that's not going to happen if I do this. So mine was like touching centre of my forehead, like touch wood, it won't happen, or that's what makes it the disorder. And like other things, like people, most of the time you hear about people being like obsessively clean and stuff, and like that's because if they don't do a certain amount of cleaning, something bad will happen. And I think when it was bad for me, it was like if I didn't put enough ice cubes in this drink, if I didn't put a specific number of ice cubes in this drink, so and so will happen. So it's kind of like your brain sort of fighting against itself.
So when
And
when
yeah,
did you get diagnosed with it?
well, I started noticing all these like it was like getting a bit draining kind of things, like these thoughts coming in and my compulsions. That must have been like about 2018, 2019. And then we had like a mental health awareness day with Aquatics GB, and like it's like a PowerPoint, anxiety, listed it all out, depression, listed it all out, OCD. And I'm like reading all the symptoms. I'm like, oh, hold on a minute, like these sound like what I'm going through. So then obviously at the end of the day, I pulled the doctor aside and I was like, this is what has been happening to me. Like, do you think it sounds like OCD? And he's like, yeah. So I got checked into like a psychiatrist and everything, and that's when I was sort of diagnosed. It was probably towards the end of 2019. And yeah, so that's been 5 years. So it's been definitely a long journey of lots of psychiatrists, loads of different types of talking therapy, and then medication, which has really helped. And yeah, just learning how to deal with yourself. It's definitely a long journey.
So how was your symptoms now? Are they under control?
Yeah, I'd say they're under control. Maybe it's gone from like probably like I don't know how bad it was when it was bad, like 10 times in a minute to like 10 times a day. So it's completely different. Like back in like 2019, it was like keeping me up at night. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't go about the day normally. But now it's definitely a lot better. Like I said, I can't even actually pinpoint a number of how many times I go through this obsessive compulsion cycle. Probably a handful. So it's definitely a massive change since I first got diagnosed.
And what is the difference between OCD and superstition? Because, in sport, they often talk about superstitions, don't they? And you'll see, like, a tennis player, for instance, before he serves, might have to bounce the ball 3 times or something. So,
Yeah.
what do you know what the difference is?
I'm not sure I know what the medical difference is, but I can say that I'm a very superstitious person. And I don't know if that comes from my anxiety or my OCD, but I had things like that. Like I'd had to slap myself 3 times before the blocks, or I had to do a certain amount of med ball slams before I went down for a race. And I think that's more of like a reassurance. It's not as like these intrusive thoughts are coming in, not, and then the compulsions are just a bit different, I think, than. But then again, it's so hard. I sound like I'm just speaking loads of mumbo jumbo. But back in 2019, I remember at European short course, and if I didn't touch wood, the race would go awful. So I guess there is a fine line, but I think it's having that the superstitions and the reassurance is different to these intrusive thoughts and, the obsession over them and the compulsions.
Yeah. So do you still have the superstitions, or have you had to kind of control those together when you've been controlling the OCD?
I think in turn they've gotten a lot better. Like you would see me behind the blocks going like this and like patting my legs a certain amount of times and standing on a certain side of the block. But I think over the years, it's part of the therapy is exposure therapy. That's a lot of the OCD therapy is. And
What does
I
that
think
mean? Exposure therapy?
so like putting yourself in that uncomfortable situation. So I remember mine was like, if I had this intrusive thought or like a car drove past my house. So in the past, I would immediately be like this because I'd think that the people in the car were going to come out and try and kill me or something. So like my therapist would say, like, let the car drive past and just sit there for as long as you can before you go about the compulsion. So it might have only been 5 seconds, but still that was, a stepping stone into getting better. And I think in turn, you can put that into swimming and into sports by having these superstitions, and sometimes you might not do them and the race still goes well. So they kind of come hand in hand almost.
So it's kind of exposing yourself to it and then seeing that the bad thing you thought might happen doesn't happen. So it retrains your brain that actually it's okay if you don't do that because the bad thing isn't going to happen.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one of the hardest things about it. And I remember I did a podcast with Sky Sports a few months ago, and Henry Slade, the rugby player, was on the OCD episode as well. And he said about how he was doing this exposure therapy and I can't remember what the exact thing was. Like maybe he didn't tie his boots in the right order. Obviously trying to get better and not do the compulsion. And then he went out on the pitch and broke his leg. So that for someone with OCD, like, would completely just derail all of that sort of training. So yeah, I think it's good to start small. So like, oh, maybe I don't put that extra ice cube in my drink. Like, is my house going to set on fire? And then it doesn't. So then you kind of start to just get more and more confident with it. And it is kind of like training your body. You have to train your mind.
Yeah.
So very, very hard, but worth it.
Yeah. Do you feel in a much better place now?
Yeah, for sure.
In life and swimming, or?
Yeah. It's like not controlling me or anything. And I'm definitely a much happier person because, like I said, it's so draining. And, you put all your energy into these negative things, you just become a bit of not a Debbie Downer, but, it's hard to actually enjoy life, I guess, when you like that. So yeah, I'm definitely in a much better place, thankfully.
Brilliant. And do your teammates know about it? Like, do you talk about it with them?
Yeah, I'm normally quite open, more about my anxiety and stuff, but like because I never like to discuss about OCD because there's so many misconceptions about it. And I remember I told my teammates that I was doing this podcast with Sky, and they're like, "Oh, what's it on?" "Oh, OCD." "Oh, you're not clean though." And like that, which is true. I'm a very messy, cluttered person, but like they just didn't know what OCD was, and I'm like, oh, so these people in their mid-20s still don't understand what OCD is. So I think that's one of the important things about talking about it, which I was not that I was ashamed to talk about it. I just never had the opportunity, I guess. And I think that's the important thing to start talking about it, is just to get rid of these misconceptions and start spreading.
Yeah, awareness.
Yeah, awareness. And so they didn't even know what it was. So yeah, there's still a lot to do in getting it out there. But
yeah, that's why I asked you at the beginning actually to like describe what it is, because I think a lot of people, exactly like you said, they'll be like, "Oh, you're so OCD, you're not washing your hands."
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to wash your hands, you're so OCD. And they like the term just gets banded about, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And like people who like to keep their desk clean or something, just because, like, it's not because if they don't do that, something bad's going to happen. They just might be a clean person. They're like, "Oh yeah, I've got OCD."
Yeah.
When in reality, it's actually such a dark disorder, and like it's really, really, affects your life. So yeah, I guess we need to stop throwing the word around. Yeah. But I think that you just got to start with the education and raising awareness.
Yeah, well, thanks for talking about it, because that's the start, isn't it? Just talking about it, and hopefully people will listen to this podcast and be aware. But also, it's so important to hear that you can get better.
Yeah, for sure. yeah, if you go back to where I was when I was like suffering through it, I thought this was going to be my whole life. And, I've suffered with bad anxiety and stuff, and it does get better. It does take effort. I would say, like, it's not an easy ride, and you do have to put the work in. Because it is like training your brain. It's just like training your body in the pool. It's that you have to train your brain and your mind, but it is definitely worth it. And there are better days out there, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And this actually takes us really nicely to my final question that I always ask my guests. If you could go back in time to when things were at their worst, so like you've just said, when things were at their worst with your OCD, what do you wish you could have told yourself?
Oh, I don't know. I wish I could have shown myself how I am now, I think, and just see how much easier life is. Not that it's easy, it's just a lot easier than it was, and that it will get better, and you're not going to be trapped in this cycle forever. Like, I just wish I could show the difference. I wish I could show my younger self, like me now, because it's a completely different person.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think at the time when I was at my worst, I knew I had all that support, but I guess I would have told myself to like use it more, I think.
Yeah. I think that's just really inspirational to hear. Thank you. And, like we talked about, the way you kind of dealt with the 6 months leading into the Olympics, the strength you had there, I'm sure probably arose from the difficulties that you'd encountered with your OCD as well. So it's all these little adversities that just build on making you stronger and stronger and stronger.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Freya. Thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you.
Congratulations on everything you achieved in Paris. I know it wasn't the medals you wanted. But I think, like I said, I think you did amazingly, and it's all about the long goal, isn't it? So I look forward to seeing the journey to LA 28, I suppose.
I know, here we go, another 4 years.
It's just another 4 years, it's fine.
Yeah.
Thank you, Freya. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening today to that chat with Freya. I really hope you enjoyed it. I think she's another inspirational young athlete and one to definitely keep your eye on leading into LA 2028. Check back in next week for another episode of When Life Gives You Lemons. We've got a few more special Olympic and Paralympic guests coming up. Remember, you can listen on all your podcast streaming platforms and also watch it on YouTube if you prefer to watch it in video format.